and he is the first person in the universe. So therefore, Vaishnava Dharma is not recent; it's very, very ancient. And of course, even Shiva is a Vaishnava. So the object of his meditation is Vishnu. The Prajapatis, that is the sons of Brahma, were also worshippers of Vishnu. And of course, Narada Muni, his Brahma's son, is a Shaktivesh avatar, and he's famous because he's a devotee. He preaches bhakti everywhere. So all of these personalities are, first day of Brahma's life. These are the persons. Vaishnavas were there from the very beginning. The teachings were there from the beginning, and the devotees were there from the very beginning. If we get more recent and we come up into our day of Brahma, which is halfway through Brahma's life,
Hare Krishna, everyone. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Vashakya Deshatarine Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare Jaya Radha Gopinatha Shri Radhe Jaya Jagannatha Jaya Baladeva Jaya Subhadra Mai Jaya Sudarshana Jaya Giri Govardhan, Giri Govardhan, Giri Govardhan, Jaya Giri Govardhan, Jaya Gauranitai, Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Gurudev, 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev, Nitya Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitya Gaura Hari Bol. जय श्री श्री राधा गोपीनाथ भगवान की जय, श्री श्री राधा माधव अष्ट सखी वृंद की जय, श्री श्री गिरि गोवर्धन की जय, श्री श्री गौरनिताय की जय, पंचतत्व भगवान की जय, श्री जगन्नाथ बलदेव सुभद्रा मैया चक्र की जय, श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय, श्री गुरुदेव की जय, गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल. Devotees Hare Krishna, all glories to the assembled devotees Hare Krishna, all glories to the assembled devotees Hare Krishna. Narayanam namaskrityam naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudiraye nashtaprayeshu avadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttama sloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki mukam karoti vachalam pangum langayate girim yatkrapat maham vande shri gurum dinasarinam paramananda madhavam shri chaitanya ishwaram hari om tat sat. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we are continuing second canto, which we started in the new year. So in the second canto, we are in the first chapter. We finished 10 verses last week. Today we are continuing from the 11th verse. Verse number 11. Etan nirvidayamananam icchatam akuto bayam yoginam nirnitam harer namanukirtanam. Translation. O King, constantly chanting of the holy name of the Lord after the ways of the great authority is the doubtless and the fearless way of success for all, including those who are free from all material desires, those who are desires of all material enjoyment, and also those who are self-satisfied by the drink of transcendental knowledge. So this is in text number 10. So we saw how there was the glory of Srimad Bhagavatam that was spoken here. In text number 10, that's the last verse we saw. In that, the glory of Srimad Bhagavatam is spoken. In the next text, which is the 11th text, Jiva Goswami comments that Sukadeva Goswami is instructing the king to about the Bhagavatam's main subject. What is the core of Bhagavatam subject? What is the most important topic in the Bhagavatam? First, he told the glories of Bhagavatam. Now he's giving the summary and the most important or the main subject of Srimad Bhagavatam, which is chanting of the holy name. Right. So in commentary to this verse, Srila Prabhupada also talks about the 10 offenses to the holy name. He talks about first part of the purport. He talks about three things. Chanting of the holy name is desired for people who want material desires, people who want to achieve liberation, and people who are free from material desires. There are three categories that are talked here. So Srila Prabhupada explains people who are free from material desires can only be devotees. Even the jnanis, the karmis, the hatha yogis, they all have some kind of desire, right? The only person who is completely free from all desires is a devotee, because all his desire is to satisfy the Supreme Lord. Supreme Lord's desire is his desire. He doesn't have a desire on his own. Whatever Krishna wants, he wants to do that, satisfy the Lord. So basically that's why he has no material desire. So for devotees, for karmis, opposite side, people who want to enjoy materially, for them as well, and people who are neither devotees nor karmis, who want to achieve liberation, they want to get out of the material world, but they don't want to do devotional service. So that's the third category, in between category. So for those kind of people as well, so for all three kinds of people, there is only one thing that will help them achieve their goal, that is the chanting of the holy name of the Lord. That's the only way of succeeding. And into commentary on this verse, Sridhara Swami, who is one of them, who's the original commentator on Srimad Bhagavatam, state that nothing is more beneficial than chanting the holy name of the Lord. But Jiva Goswami adds a condition to that particular statement, right? Yeah, that chanting of the holy name is beneficial, whatever we want, but he adds one condition: what one must avoid the offenses against the holy name if one must attain the ultimate result. And that's why you see Srila Prabhupada talks about the 10 offenses very detailedly in the purport. So this is very important. This is the main crux of Bhagavatam. What is the main subject of Bhagavatam? Is chanting the holy name of the Lord, right? Chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. But it gives all success, whether you want material success, whether somebody wants liberation, somebody wants to achieve. For us devotees, we want to advance in devotional service, purify our heart and everything. For all three people, chanting of the holy name is the best. But one condition is if we want to achieve the ultimate result, right? Now there are three stages of chanting: Nama Aparad, Nama Bas, and Suddha Nam. So Nama Aparad can give material, can give some material benefit. Nama Bas can give liberation, right? Only Suddhanam can give Krishna Prem. So if we want to achieve the ultimate goal, the ultimate prayojana, we have Sambandha, Abhideya and Prayojana. We saw the Sambandha is, Srimad Bhagavatam itself is the Sambandha. Abhideya, what is the Abhideya? Chanting the holy name. Process is to chant the holy name. And what is the Prayojana? The Prayojana is to achieve Prema for Krishna. But that Prayojana, for that Prayojana to be achieved, the holy name has to be chanted without offenses. So that's why the 10 offenses are very detailedly explained by Srila Prabhupada in context of text 11. So my request is, please read the purport, and go through it. Through the 10 offenses. We will not go through it here. In the future chapters, when we may go through each of the offenses separately. Text 12. Kim pramattasya babubihai parokshairhaya nairiha varam muhurtam viditam ghatate shreyase yataha. Translation: what is the value of prolonged life which is wasted inexperienced by years in this world? Better a moment full of full consciousness, because that gives one a start in searching after his supreme interest. That is a translation. So now he has glorified the chanting of the holy name of the Lord. And he has said that it is fortunate to chant at the time of death. Then the question may rise is, but wouldn't it have been more fortunate if the king have reigned for many more years? And is it not unfortunate that he has to leave this body, instead of reigning, and he could have avoided, by chanting the holy name. Is it better if I can use the holy name to just avoid death or unfavorable situation in the material world? So people may ask that question as well. And to answer that, Sukadeva Goswami defines fortune and misfortune in terms of elevation of the consciousness. What is the value of living? He is asking, even if we live a long life, it is completely wasted if we don't learn anything, isn't it? So better, that is why he's saying, better a moment of full consciousness, because that gives one a start in searching for his supreme interest. So the king's fortune is not defined as the power to rule over the world for many number of years. Rather, Sukadeva Goswami encourages a life lived fully with full consciousness of one supreme interest, even if that life lasted at least a moment. This is very similar in a way to the Western concept, but very different, radically different at the same time. It is similar in the sense that in the even Western world, live in the moment. Whatever you want to do, live as if you are going to die the next moment. But the problem is that we run after things that are actually really not happiness things, whereas Vedic literature also prescribes the same thing. There are three things we'll see that about in time. That in the there is past, present, and future. In the Vedic literature, one who lives in the past is in mode of ignorance, tamogun. One who laments, this happened in the past, that happened in the past. Either happy feeling or negative. Oh, I was happy, now I don't have that feeling. I used to enjoy this, but now I can't. So that kind of lamentation is a mode of ignorance. Thinking of the past is ignorance, and thinking of the future all the time, I want to achieve this, I want to get this, I want to do that, I want to do this, that's in mode of ignorance, mode of passion, because it's about I want to get this that, I want to achieve this that. Always thinking about future is in mode of passion. But thinking about the current today and living as of today is mode of sattva gun. But living today, living now to the fullest extent, meaning using our human body to the fullest extent. That's what it means. Not degrading ourselves, right? Not living like a pig or an animal, or like an animal, but to use it to the best possible way. Get the best out of the body that we have today, now. And how do we do that? Is by elevating our consciousness. And that is why he's saying even the moment of life which is towards spirituality is far better. I mean, there's no even comparison compared to one who lives even a long life which is completely wasted in material pursuit. So then the question may rise, okay, is the time enough? Just one moment, how it is enough to purify myself, elevate myself to that supreme level and come to the topmost level? That may be the next question we may ask. And for that question, in text 13, Sukadeva Goswami gives an answer. He says, Katvango nama rajarishir jnana vyeyatam ihayusaha muhurtat sarvam utsrijya gatavan abhayam harin. Translation: the saintly king Katvanga, after being informed that the duration of his life would only be a moment more, at once freed himself from all material activities and took shelter of the supreme safety, the personality of Godhead. So here he gives an example just to answer that question, that if I have more time, why only momentary time? More time also, I can do more Krishna consciousness and I can purify myself gradually. The king, Parikshit Maharaj, if he is given more time, he could have achieved more things spiritually. But to achieve spiritual perfection, actually a moment is enough. And that is the example Sukadeva Goswami is giving is that of Katvanga Maharaj. So Prabhupada writes about Katvanga Maharaj. He was a great Raja Rishi, and once when there was a war between the Devatas and the Asuras, demons, the Devatas requested Maharaj Katvanga to help them because he was a great warrior. So he, being a great warrior, he accepted, and then he fought on behalf of the Devatas and helped them secure the victory. So they were super happy. So all the Devatas, they wanted to give him some boon. And they asked him, what boon would you like from us? They thought, I want to live in the heaven, this, that, he's going to ask. They were ready to give any boon that he was asked. But Maharaj Katvanga, he was one who was self-realized. He was a great devotee of the Lord. So the only question he had was, what is the my appointed time of death? Right? Can you please explain to me what is the time of my death? Because he wanted to completely absorb himself. And then the Devatas, they calculated, and Yamadharma Raja was one of the Devatas, right? So the answer was given that he is going to die in a moment. And Katvanga Maharaj, he was not shocked, he was not disturbed. Rather, he immediately left heaven, came to the material world, to this world, and he engaged himself completely, in the meditation of the Lord, and he gave up his body. right? And Prabhupada writes about Raja Rishis, great Rishis, who are so highly elevated that they had the capability to rule the world. At the same time, even though they were ruling the whole world and governing everything, still they were completely Krishna consciousness. And when the moment came, Katwang Maharaj was not disturbed. He was not, he didn't ask for extension of his life. He didn't beg. He was told he had a moment and he used the moment perfectly to achieve perfection. So, in comparison, Parishit Maharaj having 7 days is so much, right? Srila Prabhupada, there is a very famous video. There's this question, in Prabhupada gives a Bhagavatam class about the importance of surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, how only by surrendering can we achieve the perfection. Srila Prabhupada, hammers that point. So at the end of the class, there's a devotee who asked this question, Western devotee, that how long does it take for one to surrender to the Lord? And then, Prabhupada says, if you want, you can surrender this moment. It takes 1 moment to surrender to the Lord. Actually, it takes only a moment to surrender to the Lord. 1 moment is enough to achieve perfection, like Katwang Maharaj. So then we may ask this question, Prabhu, then why are you asking me to chant 16 rounds, getting up early in the morning, doing Mangala Arti, doing so many things, why am I asked to do all these things? We may ask that question. What we are actually doing is preparing for that 1 moment. We are not ready. We haven't ready to surrender to the Lord. We are not ready to go to that moment. So we are preparing ourselves. When we do sadhana bhakti, we are basically preparing ourselves to achieve this, right? So it is very important, to come to that moment where we can, serve the Lord. And that's what we are trying to achieve. Text 14. Tavapi etarhi kauravya saptaham jivitavadihi upakalpaya tatsarvam tavadyat sampararkyam ikam. Translation: Maharaj Parikshit, now your duration of life is limited to 7 more days. So during this time, you can perform all those rituals which are needed for the best purpose of your life. So, so Sukadeva Goswami is now encouraging Parikshit Maharaj. See, Katwang Maharaj had only 1 moment, and even with that 1 moment, he was able to achieve perfection. Comparatively, you have 7 days, as we saw. He's saying you have 7 days, but you can use those 7 days completely and achieve the best purpose of life. So, human body is such a boon. Like with human body, if we properly use, 1 moment is enough with the human body to achieve the supreme destination. So we should all be using, trying to get to that 1 moment of complete surrender to the Lord, and that should be our aim of human life. Even if we are not prepared to completely surrender, at 1 moment and achieve perfection, the whole idea is we can come to that moment by practicing Krishna consciousness deeply. And that's what Sukadeva Goswami says. It doesn't matter whether it has 1 moment, 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, 5 years, 7 years, 15 years. Our whole aim is to achieve that 1 moment. Text 15. Antakaletu purusha agate gatavasaha chindyad ashanga shastrena spriham dehenu yechatam. Translation: at the last stage of one's life, one should be bold enough not to be afraid of death, but one must cut off all attachment to the material body and everything pertaining to it and all desires thereof. This verse is very, very important for all us devotees to set the right goal, right? Sukadeva Goswami, in the previous verse, he concluded that, he has 7 days, so he can easily prepare, for his next life. Srila Prabhupada expresses, Sukadeva Goswami thought still further in his purport. Actually, Srila Prabhupada his purports are so deep that he is elaborating the inner mood of Sukadeva Goswami, right? So he writes this particular verse, this particular paragraph. He says, indirectly the Goswami told Maharaj Parikshit told Maharaj Parikshit that he should be ready to take shelter of the sound representation of the Lord for the 7 days still remaining in the duration of his life, and thus get himself liberated. In other words, everyone can best prepare himself for the next life simply by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam as it was recited by Sukadeva Goswami to Maharaj Parikshit. So when we are doing this scripture study class on a daily basis, when we read Srimad Bhagavatam, when we read the purports of Srila Prabhupada, we are actually preparing ourselves, right? You would see, for the ultimate exam. And what is the ultimate exam? Death is the ultimate exam. If we prepare ourselves, if we study Bhagavatam deeply, if we understand Bhagavatam, if we hear from the authorities, and if we implement it in our life, then what is at the time of death we will have no fear. Abhayam harim, that was in the previous verse, it was expressed abhayam harim, in Khatvanga Maharaj. Abhayam means no fear. Because why? Because he has surrendered, taken shelter of Hari. One who has taken shelter of Hari has no fear. So if some or other, if we are able to do that, then we will be free of all the fears. So generally our desires at the time of death attracts our next body, right? So that is why here Sukadeva Goswami is saying the best use of remaining days of anyone's life is to prepare for next life. So Srila Prabhupada always in the purport that we have to change this body, whether even during this life we keep changing the body. We have a childhood, and as we change bodies, the aspirations also keep changing, right? And then we cannot stop the desires, but we can purify the desires, Srila Prabhupada says. So living being, Srila Prabhupada says, is meant for service activities, and his desire should be centered around service activities. So it applies for all the human beings, Srila Prabhupada. So we should, use whatever remaining life. We may be young, we may have 78 years ahead of us, we may be old, we may have only 10, 20 years, it doesn't matter. We may have even 10 minutes. We should use all our available time in the service, and through that we can achieve perfection. So how should we prepare for death? Sukadeva suggests, how do I prepare myself for death? Now he's going to start from the basics. Now he will go from the basics, as we saw in the summary. Some topics he starts from a very basic position, not for devotees. There are positions lower than devotees as well, like the jnanis and the karmis, right? So he starts at the most basic level. Text 16. One should sorry. Grihat pravrajito diraha punyatirtha jala plutaha suchau vivikta ashino vidivat kalpita sane. Translation: one should leave home and practice self-control. In a sacred place, he should bathe regularly and sit down in a lonely place, duly sanctified. Now, this is very similar to the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna talks about mind control. You will see similarities between these two. And then at the end of 6th chapter, Krishna says this is all very difficult. The topmost yogi is a devotee. And similarly, you will see that Sukadeva Goswami also, after talking about all these things, he will finally conclude that devotional service is the topmost. Chanting is the only way to achieve perfection. So the question may be asked, why is he recommending this at all? We will see that as we go through it. So Sukadeva Goswami is first, suggesting that first we learn to detach from the temporary. So Srila Prabhupada also explains in the purport. We saw, we should use our life to prepare ourselves for the next life better. And Srila Prabhupada says, to prepare oneself for the better life, one must get out of the so-called home. Modern civilization, Srila Prabhupada says, why we need to get out of the home? Because the whole concept of home in the modern world, is um, you know, uh, you know, uh, is to live comfortably and increase the attachment. Srila Prabhupada writes, right? And it doesn't, promote detachment, right? And also, that is the reason that we should voluntarily give up that for. So Srila Prabhupada explains, therefore, to live apart from the family life, actually what it means is to become self-controlled in regard to all sense desires, particularly sex desires. Srila Prabhupada says, it's not that Srila Prabhupada says there are many people who leave home, they go to the holy place, uh, but they fall into the whole trap of getting engaging in illicit activities. So that is why you see there are two things. One, you should be detached, and detachment not like I give up my family, comfort, everything. At the same time, there should also be self-control. Both are equally important. The concept of self-control is very important. That's why we have 4 regulative principles, not only chanting the holy name of the Lord. In addition, we also have the 4 regulative principles. Both are equally important, right? Srila Prabhupada says, we should understand the goal. What is the goal of this verse? It's not that everybody can leave home, go to a holy place and sit, particularly in Kali Yuga. So Srila Prabhupada actually gives the summary. He says the summary is to engage the mind in the Lord by chanting the holy name. As long as we are able to achieve that, wherever we are, we have achieved this state. Text 17. Abhyasen manasa suddham trivridat brahmaksharam param mano yache jitasvaso brahma bijam avishmaran. Translation: after sitting in the above manner, make the mind remember the 3 transcendental letter Om, and by regulating the breathing process and the control of process, control the mind so as to excuse me, so as not to forget the transcendental seed. So the next step is described. Okay, I leave everything, I go sit in the forest. What should I do? And then what do I do? And after sitting in that manner, sorry, one should continuously remember the transcendental seed mantra, which is the seed mantra Om. Thus the materially absorbed mind should be brought under control. Srila Prabhupada, in the purport of text 17, there are very important points that he mentions. The most important step in a spiritual life is changing the habit of mind. The mind cannot be killed, Srila Prabhupada very clearly, because sometimes we artificially try to control our desires or give up the desires. We can never give up the desires, right? Srila Prabhupada very clearly says mind or desire cannot be stopped. But to develop the desire to function for spiritual realization, the mind has to be changed. See, the mind's desire cannot be changed, but it can be diverted into a different direction. And what is that direction? Instead of looking at the material things, we want to look at the spiritual side of the things, right? So the mind is the pivot of all the sense organs. So if we can, change the direction of the mind, automatically all the senses also turn their direction. Srila Prabhupada writes. So that's why the devotees are prescribed to fix their minds on the person of the absolute truth. And Srila Prabhupada explains this whole process. What Sukadeva Goswami is explaining is for one who cannot fix his mind on the form of the Lord, because the faith on the form of the Lord doesn't come on its own. It can come only by the mercy of a devotee. And given that many people are not still touched in their life by a pure devotee, not everybody has the capability to concentrate or fix their mind on the form of the Lord. So we are all who are here hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, engaging in chanting the holy name of the Lord, worshipping the deity form of the Lord, going to the temple, seeing the deity form of the Lord, we are all extremely fortunate, right? We are all extremely fortunate because there are millions of people, even in upper planetary system, who can't fix their mind on the form of the Lord, who can't engage in devotional service of the Lord. By the mercy of a pure devotee like Srila Prabhupada, we are all given this freely. Like by the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we are all given this capability to do it. But then, whether we take it seriously or not, that's a second question. But then what we have got is something we are very fortunate, right? So the process that Sukadeva Goswami explaining, as Srila Prabhupada writes, Prabhupada says, but one who is unable to accommodate such personal features of the law absolute is disciplined in impersonality to train the mind to make further progress. See, so whatever is being explained is for one who cannot take up to devotional service because still he hasn't received the mercy of the pure devotee of the Lord. Even Krishna cannot give devotional service. The devotional service can only be given by a devotee of the Lord. That's why the first offense to the holy name, as Srila Prabhupada explained in the previous purport, is to offend a devotee who have, So Srila Prabhupada actually in the purport, I think in the 12th verse purport in this canto, he's saying we should neither criticize a devotee or neither allow others to criticize a devotee. We should not even hear others criticizing a devotee, right? We should be super careful and we shouldn't discriminate. Oh, he's a good devotee, he's a medium devotee, he's a bad devotee. Yes, for in terms of association, we may have to understand, who is a Uttama, Madhyama and Kanishta. We do, but then not for criticizing, right? It is for what level, how to behave with that person, right? For Kanishta, we should be, we are merciful. To the Madhyama, we should be friendly. For the Uttama, we should do service, right? But for that purpose, we judge, not to criticize. The moment we criticize, we will fall down. Not only we criticizing, we shouldn't, Prabhupada says, we shouldn't allow even others to, criticize devotees. He says, either we should cut the tongue of a person who talks bad, or if we can't do that, then we should, commit suicide. The point is not that we should commit suicide, but the point is that's how serious hearing the, criticism of a devotee. It should be completely avoided. Right, because devotee is the basis, and not everybody can pick up devotional service. If Sukadeva Goswami, Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the primary book of bhakti, in that he is including certain topics for person who can't do devotional service, then we can understand that most people cannot get devotional service. So it's a very, very rare person who gets devotional service, and we get it not by our own merits. It is only by the mercy of a devotee. So the basis of our devotional service is other devotees and the association of devotees. Text 18. Niyached vishaye byokshan manasa buddhi sararatihi manakarma bir akshiptam subarte dharaye diya. Translation: gradually, as the mind becomes progressively spiritualized, withdraw it from sense activities, and by intelligence the senses will be controlled. The mind, too absorbed in material activities, can be engaged in the service of the personality of Godhead and become fixed in full transcendental consciousness. So, for a practitioner, it is a gradual step. Whereas for devotees, we are so fortunate that on day one we are given the service. Whereas for others who doesn't have this mercy, they have to first purify their mind, withdraw it from the sense activities, control the senses through intelligence, and then the mind, can be engaged in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Right? Srila Prabhupada says, even for a person who, if somebody even follows this path, even after controlling his senses and even reaching the stage of samadhi, they can still fall down. And he gives the example of Vishwamitra Muni, who falls down for Menaka, right? So Srila Prabhupada gives that example, and he says that that's the danger of this process. And whereas in the next verse and in the future verses, Sukadeva Goswami recommends an assured policy, right, which will help us to fix his mind and completely on the service of the personality of Godhead. So, Srila Prabhupada compares this with devotional service and gives that in the path of devotion, success is 100% guaranteed. There is no loss or diminution in this effort. And it will always lead to success. There is no question of failure in spiritual life. Text 19. Tatraika vyayam jayet avyuchinena chetasa mano nirvisayam yuktva tatakkinchana smaret padam tat paramam vishnor mano yatra prasidati. Translation: thereafter you should meditate upon the limbs of Vishnu one after another without being deviated from the conception of the complete body. Thus the mind becomes free from all sense objects. There should be no other thing to be thought upon, because the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, is the ultimate truth. The mind becomes completely reconciled in him only. So now the yogi is encouraged at this point, after purifying his senses, after chanting Om for a long time, withdrawing the senses from the sense object, gradually engaging the mind in the service of the Lord. At this point, he is encouraged to meditate upon the limbs of Vishnu one after another without deviation from the conception of the body, material body. At this point, the mind will become completely free. Sukadeva Goswami is saying, and he finally confirms that Vishnu is the supreme, ultimate, pure, truth. And at this point is when the mind becomes completely absorbed in Vishnu, that he has no other material desires. And Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport, the mind being spiritually concerned, one should engage himself in the transcendental loving service of the Lord by different devotional activities of hearing, chanting. If performed under proper guidance, this is the surest path. That's how he finished the purport to the previous verse. On the path to full God realization, in this verse, one can check the mind of materialism, but by first training it to see everything as Vishnu according to pantheistic view. Srila Prabhupada writes about pantheism. Pantheism is the doctrine that identified God with each object in the universe, right? We are able to see Krishna everywhere. Pandita Samadarshinaha. Similarly, the first step is to see everything in relation to Krishna, because for a person, if you tell, there is an example that is given in the Upanishads. In the Upanishad, people cannot perceive spirituality immediately. Let's say, to give a very, what you call a very crude or a very similar example. Let's say somebody grows up throughout his life not looking up at the sky, never seeing a moon in his life. Now, how do you describe moon to such a person? Right? All he knows is his house, the trees around it, the plant, the earth. He has never looked up and never looked at the sky. He has never thought about it. He is he is very limited. To such a person, how do you describe what a moon is? The Upanishad gives the example. To such a person, how do we generally teach the moon? In the night sky, we take him, you go outside your house, there is a tree, look up at the top two branches of the tree, and between those two branches, you will see a white object, and that white object is the moon, right? Because he can only, he in his conception, he knows only a tree. If you tell him sky, he cannot understand. If you tell him a white ball, he cannot understand, because he has no perception of those. He has only perception of a tree. To such a person, what we do is that is between those two limbs of what you see is the moon, right? So we link the moon to the tree, so that this guy can perceive the moon, right? Even though moon has nothing to do with the tree. Similarly, spirituality is completely different from materiality, but still, because everything originates from Krishna, we can still, and we have only perception of material things. The first step is to see Krishna even in all the material objects first, because we don't have higher realization. Whatever realization we have, connect that realization with the Supreme. Once we understand the Supreme, then we can give up this connection, right? So that is the first step. So pantheism, Srila Prabhupada refers to this progression as the progression from immature to mature pantheism. In his purport to text 20, next verse, he explains the value of both degrees of pantheism. He says, this is what he writes: to acquire such a qualification of God realization in the personal feature, the neophyte impersonalist is given a chance to realize the relation of the Lord in everything by the philosophy of pantheism. Pantheism in its higher status does not permit the student to form an impersonal conception of the absolute truth, but it extends the conception of the absolute truth into the field of so-called material energy. Everything created by the material energy can be dovetailed with the absolute by an attitude of service, which is essential part of the living energy. The pure devotee of the Lord knows the art of converting everything into its spiritual existence by the service attitude, and only in that devotional way can the theory of pantheism be perfected. So, pantheism not only is just seeing Krishna and everything. So, and then we shouldn't, Prabhupada, he explains, we shouldn't, come to in most people, most religions can relate everything to a relation to the God. But the problem is that they can't go beyond that level and they get stuck there. And because they can't go beyond that level, because Krishna is related to everything, he cannot be in one place, so he cannot have a form. They see the form of the Lord is constricting him. But whereas we see Krishna is there in one place, simultaneously he can relate to everything. Srila Prabhupada gives the example of sun. Even though the sun is there in one place, through its heat and rays, it can relate to everything. Similarly, even though Krishna is there in one place, he is everywhere as well simultaneously. It is possible for the Lord. So, we shouldn't, pantheism is a very basic level of understanding, and the topmost form, as we graduate, we shouldn't get diverted by impersonalism, is what Srila Prabhupada says. Text 20. Rajastamobhyam akshiptam vimudamana atmanaha yachedaranayadiro hantiya tatkritam malam. Translation: one's mind is always agitated by passionate mode of material nature and bewildered by the ignorant mode of nature. But one can rectify such conception by the relation of Vishnu and thus become pacified by cleansing the dirty things created by them. So here again, the straightforward way of purifying the mind. Passion always agitates the mind and ignorance always bewilders the mind. Those are the nature of passion and ignorance, and they always cause dirty things. Malam is like stool, or dirty things. They always impurify the mind. The mind is agitated, it is very difficult to control it. So we should use this devotional service to elevate ourselves to the sattva guna. That's why Srila Prabhupada, he writes so many things. Even in the last, if you see the final lesson, Srila Prabhupada talks about moving this to sattva guna and to suddha sattva. He says getting up early in the morning, chanting the holy name of the Lord. These are all the most important part, and the whole varnashrama system is designed to help one move from tamogun to sattvagun and engage in devotional service in that level. Text 21. Yasyam sandaryamanayam yogino bhakti lakshanaha asu sampadyate yoga ashrayam badram ikshataha. O king, by this system of remembrance, by being fixed in the habit of seeing all good personal conception of the Lord, one can very soon attain devotional service to the Lord under his direct shelter. So this is when a yogi comes to bhakti lakshanam, that is a word that is used, bhakti lakshanaha, that is when he sees everything in relation to the Lord, and ultimate also, as the purport Srila Prabhupada says, he is not bewildered by the impersonalistic view. When both of that happens, that's when he becomes eligible to attain devotional service, right? Srila Prabhupada in the purport, he talks a little bit on this pantheism. Pantheism, or the system of feeling the presence of the Almighty everywhere, is a sort of training of the mind to become accustomed to the devotional conception, and if it is this devotional attitude of the mystic that makes possible the successful termination of such mystic attempts. So basically, this is when we relate some or other to the Lord, when we see everything in relation to the Lord, that's when slowly we get out of the material conception and our material desires, and the mind gets purified of the passion and ignorance. So what is the goal of these graduated modes of thought? That is explained in text 20. That is what is explained in this text 21. What is the ultimate goal? Is to do devotional service. So Sridhar Goswami, in his purport, he explains that confining the mind to one place is called dhyana or meditation, and that is the goal of yoga, right? Passion and ignorance, they destroy meditation. So how do we purify our mind and achieve the goal of dhyana? Purify the mind from its bad effects by fixing it on Vishnu. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada recommends that instead of meditating on the Lord's Virat Rupa or on Omkara, one should meditate on the deity form of the Lord. Such meditation is more effective, Srila Prabhupada says. And Srila Prabhupada also explains that the above text indicates that Vishnu form is the ultimate goal of meditation, and as such it is better to concentrate upon the forms of Vishnu than on impersonal Omkara. The later process is also more difficult than the former. So going to the temple, seeing the beautiful form of Radha Gopinath, they are so beautifully dressed, people making beautiful garlands, there is a nice smell coming, there is a prasadam that is offered. There are so many elements that purifies the mind very, very fast, because it not only pivots the mind, it also pivots the other senses, which generally pulls the mind away from our concentration. It is this in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains, even one rogue sense can actually derail the whole spiritualist whole effort, right? One of the five senses, or one of the 10 senses, like five senses and the five working senses, any one of them can pull us into danger. So when we come to devotional service, when we do bhakti, what happens is all of these senses are engaged in devotional service. The mind is as well. So there is no chance that the mind can pull the senses or the senses can pull the mind. Both can happen in devotional service, because both the mind and the senses are simultaneously engaged. What happens is the chance of fall down is very little, and it is very easy, because there is a taste. The senses also have something to enjoy, the mind also has something to enjoy. There is no artificial control of everything, so it is natural to do. And that's why Srila Prabhupada says this process is much easier compared to the previous process of leaving everything, going, sitting, and concentrating Om, withdrawing the mind, then concentrating on the form of Vishnu, then coming to the level of service, and then gradually come to the point of getting out of sattva, getting out of passion and ignorance, coming to goodness, and then doing devotional service. Whereas the process that is prescribed in Kali Yuga is straightforward: go into the service of devotional service, and then through that achieve perfection. The problem is that is why Sukadeva Goswami is going gradually, is that is nobody is qualified to come to the devotional service. Then we can all think, Prabhu, what about us? If all the yogis and the rishis who are sitting there, if they are not qualified to come to devotional service directly, what about me? And that question can only be answered by one simple answer, which is the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That's why the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is called causeless mercy. There is no cause for why we should be devotees. There is no reason why we can practice devotional service, right? We have absolutely no qualification to do devotional service, but still, we ourselves can see, even after understanding so many instructions, the 10th offense, isn't it? It is an offense to remain inattentive while chanting. And also, even after understanding to have material attachments, even after understanding so many instructions on this matter, right? We see that we are still struggling. Most of us are still struggling, but still at the same time we also are able to chant the holy name, whether it is 4 rounds, 8 rounds, 16 rounds, most of us are able to do. The reason is that is the mercy of, but generally only one who has come to the level of sadhva, controlled his senses, completely detached, only that person is qualified to become a devotee. Even without all these qualifications, we have become a devotee because that is the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That's why he is called Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate. He's giving this Krishna Prema and this process of Krishna Prema to everybody without any qualification. So he is the most merciful and magnanimous. So with that we will finish, because text 22 to 39, the next 17 verses, we will see in the next week's class. It talks about the Lord's universal the mind for purification. How to apply the meditation on the Virat Rupa to purify the mind is explained in the next 17 verses. That's one full lot. We will see that in the next week's class. So with this, I'll finish my class. Thank you. Again, as you all know, if you have any questions, you can message me 0414018739. With this, I'll finish my class. Grindaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srila Gurudev ki jai, Gaura Premanande, Hari Hari Bo.
And halfway through this particular day, in the second part of Brahma's life, we come up to Vaivasvata Manvantara, and we're going through the 28th Yuga cycle here, and then we come up to Kali Yuga here, and we find in Kali Yuga, then after Krishna disappears, Kali Yuga starts, and then we have the appearance of great Vaishnavas. We have Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya, Vishnu Swami, etc. appearing, Nimbarka Swami. So they all manifested themselves. That was approximately about 500 years before Chaitanya Mahaprabhu or something like that. And then Lord Chaitanya appeared after that. So by their mercy, then we see that in southern India and in western India, we have Vaishnav philosophies being propagated. And then finally we have Lord Chaitanya 500 years ago preaching Vaishnav Dharma. So the Vaishnava Dharma starts with Brahma, but it develops from very simple to more elaborate forms as we go on. And everything is not revealed in the beginning. So it is like a flower that starts out as a little bud, then it gets a little bigger, then it starts opening up a little bit. So bit by bit, as time passes, we get more complete revelation of Vaishnava Dharma until we get a more complete form. So it doesn't start out in a very hidden form, and it expands, just as we see the Vedas mention a little bit about Krishna, but a little bit only, not so much. And then when we come to Bhagavatam, we get all sorts